Hi everyone, Dr. Scott Sigman here, inviting you to check out some great information at the Business of Medicine session at the upcoming OSET Orthopedic Summit meeting. The session is sponsored by Veradigm and will run from 7 to 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time on Wednesday, September 18th in the Caprice 6 and 7 rooms at the new Fontainebleau Hotel in fabulous Las Vegas. This week's episode of the Ortho Show is very special to me. We're bringing on a dear friend of mine and my personal mentor in orthopedic surgery, Dr. J.R. Richmond, who is the chairman emeritus of the New England Baptist Hospital. I did my training with J.R. early on, and he's just become a dear friend of mine and always been there for me in support across my academic career. He is one of the OGs of sports medicine. He literally helped design the very first suture anchor, which we take for granted now every day that we use in clinical practice. He is literally one of the great mentors of his generation. We have so much rich history together. I know you're going to enjoy this episode. Dr. Scott Sigman, #follow the fro.
From Medical Media, this is The Ortho Show.
Hello world, Dr. Scott Sigman, your favorite opioid-sparing surgeon here for another episode of the Ortho Show podcast. We are the voice of orthopedics, bring you the best of the best in orthopedics. It is a real privilege today that we're bringing on my mentor, Dr. John Richmond, who's an orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, chairman emeritus of orthopedic surgery at the New England Baptist Hospital. He is literally one of the OGs of sports medicine and orthopedics. JR, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. I feel a little bit overwhelmed at what you claim I am.
Well, you are every bit of it. You know, we're so proud to have been a part of your lineage. You have such great doctors that you've helped to train. You're literally one of the great mentors of your generation. But look, we always like to start at the beginning.
Okay.
All right, so when and where? Like, where were you born? Were you the first doctor in the family? You know, give us the rundown as to how medicine came into play.
So I was born at the Faulkner Hospital in Boston.
There you go.
Not the one that exists now because they tore down the old one.
That's right.
They didn't leave a plaque with my name in it though.
I was born at Hopkins, so I got a little. They're still up and running, but that's great. So you're at the Faulkner.
I'm at the Faulkner. Parents lived in Roslindale at the time. Moved to Hingham, which is a suburb of Boston on the South Shore. Grew up there.
You never left.
I never left. Well, I lived away a couple of years.
Just a couple of years, but I think I've been your home for a long time.
Well, I went to prep school in New Hampshire for 4 years, so I was
Phillips
away.
Exeter, one of the best, probably one of the best high schools in the country. I mean, we're Phillips Andover by us, but they're sort of sister schools.
They're very similar, but
yeah.
they not really get along, maybe like sisters.
Right. Well, there's presidents and CEOs and all kinds of crazy people that have gone to school at these places for sure.
Yep. So I went to it when it was an all-boys school, and I had to go someplace, and it was in the boonies of New Hampshire at that time.
Sure.
So I had to go to college someplace that was in a city, and was co-ed. So I went to Penn in Philadelphia for 4 years.
Awesome. Philadelphia, University of Pennsylvania, which is it's truly a downtown campus. That couldn't have been any further from what you were doing in high school, that's for sure, right?
Oh, totally different. Yeah. Absolutely different. It was a true urban campus in a big city. I mean, Philly is, having been in the Boston area, Philly is a much bigger city, but fun place to be.
Oh, yeah, and great docile football fans. Not so much. Those crazy Philadelphia Eagles football fans, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, I got to watch a few of the football games. I was a varsity athlete at Penn, lightweight oarsman.
Awesome.
So in the training room, you could walk out the back door of the training room after eating dinner, and if the Monday Night Football was there, you could walk on to the track around Franklin Field and watch it from the sidelines.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
You didn't need an ID.
Franklin
you didn't need anything.
Field back in the day, before football is where it is right now, right?
That was in 69, 70, in that range.
Yeah, that's awesome. My father was a huge Baltimore Colts fan, and so he played for the Baltimore Colts marching band, believe it or not.
Wow.
And he would buy 2 tickets to Memorial Stadium for me, my brother, and him, and we sat up in the nosebleed seats like in the early 70s. It was just a very different experience back then for sure compared to now. But so, yeah, please go ahead.
So I went through Penn intending to be a biologist. I ended up with a degree in marine biology, and my advisor was a Nobel laureate who had me all set to go to Scripps Institute in Southern California for a PhD program. But my mother talked to me about, well, maybe you ought to think about medicine, and had me take organic chemistry. That was the only thing that I was missing in my marine biology program. I did that, kind of fell in love with the thought of being a physician, and
there you go.
Ended up going to Tufts Medical School.
And thank God, because Len Ruby, when it came to deciding who was going to be accepted to the residency, was always based on your organic chemistry score. All right, so instead of
I must have done okay.
You were thinking okay, right? Exactly. So all right, so I got a full that timeline we have to figure out too. So from there, it's off to Tufts Medical School. You decide, you make the change. It's not going to be marine biology,
right?
And you come back to Boston, to the hometown.
Come back to Boston. My girlfriend at the time and soon-to-be fiance was somebody that I'd dated all the way through college.
Sure.
And so we got married after the first year of medical school. Lived in the Boston and actually Brookline, Newton when I was a medical student.
Sure.
And then made the mistake of thinking, well, maybe I wanted to be a vascular surgeon.
Okay.
So I went back to Penn, to Hospital University of Pennsylvania, to be a vascular surgeon. The day I showed up, the very day I started internship, Mayor Rizzo, and this was the first of the two Mayor Rizzos, the dad as opposed to the son, closed Philadelphia General Hospital, which wiped out 3/8 of the chief resident spots in general surgery. So all of a sudden,
you're out of a job.
Well, I could finish, but it would take me someplace between 9 and 10 years to get all the way through vascular surgery. So I'm not doing this.
It was bad. It was bad back in the day, right?
Yeah.
There was no, getting your teeth cleaned and getting your car fixed back in the day. There was no limitations on hours. So from there, you figured out. So how did orthopedics come back in?
I did a rotation when I was early on in my residency. So probably in August or September. No, it was September. Had to be September.
Sure.
Did a rotation there. Said I can do this, and so I applied to Tufts because Tufts they weren't interviewing you until you were an intern back then.
Okay, so you weren't missing out at that point, which is good.
Right. So I interviewed at Tufts. They said, "Sure, come on back." And
all right. So who was it? So it had to have been Henry Banks.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Who was? Oh my God! Rounds with
Zeke Zimbler.
Zeke Zimbler rounds with the flashlights at 3 a.m. Yeah. Who else was on faculty back then?
Bill Donaldson, Joe Ferrone, Mike Goldberg, Juan O.
Oh, God. All the names, which were all my professors. Yeah. And it's so funny because I got to tell the story. So, all right, so you go through residency and then you stay on it as staff.
Well, I stay on at staff. Henry Banks had a falling out with with Stu Belkin, who was doing the sports medicine and taking care of the Tufts athletic teams.
Sure.
And so he fired Stu and asked me if I would take over being the sports doc.
So you're literally fresh out of residency, starting your first job.
I started when I was a chief resident.
Oh my gosh, really? Your chief resident? So you became the chief of sports medicine as a chief resident?
As a chief resident.
I love it. Now I have a bone to pick with you about this, okay? Because I'm not sure you remember this, but I'm a sophomore at Tufts University playing lacrosse.
Oh yeah.
I tweak my knee. And there's no MRIs back then, but you were like, I think you got a loose body in your knee. And so you sign me up and you take me in for surgery. But I'm like, I started doing my research on the timeline. You've been in practice for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You were attending for like 3 weeks and you're scoping my knee. And I'm like, no, man, that's J.R. Richmond. He's the best. I had no idea until I did the research this time I was looking it up. That was so great.
It was that close, huh?
It was that close. But, so for me, it was so funny because I don't remember, but I'm like, I'm in the interview process with you and Len Ruby and all the guys. And somebody asked me, like, why are you here? I'm like, well, because J.R. Richmond scoped my knee when I was a sophomore in college and I'd really like to go. We're like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. And next thing you know, here we are 30 years later. But no, I think that's fantastic. So, you've had an amazing sort of storied career in the infancy of what we were doing with arthroscopy and sports medicine, right? I mean, it was really open surgery at the time for bank hearts. What were we doing? We would do open bank hearts, and we would do BTB ACLs, right? That's what we were doing in my residency with you in like the early 90s. Does that sound about right?
Oh yeah, no, I didn't do my first hamstring ACL until the mid '90s. So everything I did prior to then was either bone tendon bone or synthetic. I did a bunch of synthetic stuff. I did a lot of synthetic.
That didn't work out so well.
Gore-Tex was not great. Dacron was actually a little bit better, but it had some design flaws that made it not perfect either. And so actually, I got to touch on my mentor. My mentor, going through residency. Was Jack McGinty. So Jack was at Newton Wellesley Hospital. He was one of the pioneers. He was the first president of ANA, the Arthroscopy Association in North America. And he was actually president for 2 years and went on ultimately to become president of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons. And he taught me arthroscopy. Actually, he taught me a lot about arthroscopy. Lorraine Wayne, his scrub nurse, really taught me arthroscopy.
We don't want to share that, but it's okay, Elaine. I love it. No, it's very true because it was so new. You know, what I loved about the program when we were there, I mean, first and foremost, you guys, we had a great program back then. We made some really good orthopedic surgeons. You guys did, and you should be very proud. But, you know, what I remember is like we would go to Newton Wellesley, we would go to New England Baptist, we would work with you guys at Tufts Medical Center. We had a tremendous experience from academic to being on the front lines in private practice as well. It was really, really cool times.
Yeah, and huge volume of surgery, too.
We went to the VA, too. And then at the VA, it's like, man, if you weren't keeping track of what was going on, it was going to go south pretty quickly. Although they don't let you do 2 cases a day, maybe. You have to get your second case started by 1. But
and if you had a third one scheduled, you know it was going to get canceled.
No, there's no question. You know, Ramid Modaber and Mark Lapp and all these really, and Bill Levine.
You had a great year.
We did. We really did. And a couple years in there, and then I think we all pretty much knew that probably Bill Levine was destined for greatness when.
Oh yeah.
You know, he was
the day he showed up, it was clear he was.
He was writing papers. He's like, "What do you got for me?" Right? You know, you guys kept giving great. And you know the story that Ramin and I went down to the academy down in New Orleans so he could present his paper like in our 3rd year. And we had a little too much fun the night before, and we totally missed his talk. And he never forgave us. He literally would now send us every year a list of all his talks to make sure we didn't walk into one accidentally. Truly one of the great stories. But, you know, as I've been doing this show, it's remarkable. You meet people and you hear the history of how things develop. And, you know, so MyTech, I want to talk about that. You and Eugene Wolf in particular, I think, were the lead investigators with MyTech on the first suture anchors.
Well, Gene didn't come in until a little bit later.
Okay.
He was the pioneer of arthroscopic bank hearts, though.
Sure.
So the original concept came out of a couple of very bright guys
from MIT.
From MIT.
Yeah.
And it was originally the nitinol, which is a shape memory metal that you could straighten out, and if it had been memorized, its shape was curved, it would straighten and then go back to curve. So you could push it around, down a needle and around a breast mass. So their original use for it was to help with breast biopsies.
Okay, interesting.
And one of them said, well, what if you try to put it into something and it won't pull out? And so they came to me through the surgical research lab at Tufts Medical Center.
Yeah.
And said, we've got this thing, and you stick it into a piece of 2x4, and they drill a hole in a piece of 2x4, and you can't pull it out. The suture always broke before the thing came out.
So the first suture anchor. I mean, we take that stuff for granted right now, right? All the things we use and do.
I mean, there's dozens of companies here making suture anchors of all shapes and varieties, and
because you guys figured out to stick it into a 2x4 and noticed that it didn't pull out.
So we went from the surgical research labs to the pathology department, and they were doing some autopsies and let us use the end of some bones, and we discovered, it works in bone too. So I think my creative thought process for MyTech was to say, I got to come up with a way that we can get the FDA to accept suture anchors. And there was studies at that time looking at repairing medial collateral ligaments of dogs and how they healed and what the strength was. And so we did a dog study on repairing medial collateral ligaments, not with screws and washers or staples, which had been done before, but with suture anchor repairs, and they worked just as well. And
so was it a 510K predicate then? You didn't have to go through an FDA discrete approval process?
They required us to do, they wanted us to do a small inhuman study before they released it completely. So Freddie Fu.
There you go. I love when the names start rolling out.
Freddie Fu, Chris Harner, myself, and Bill Donaldson at Tufts. We were the 4 investigators.
Amazing.
And so I went.
And here we are today.
So I went down to Pittsburgh, so that Freddie and I and Chris would all be doing it the same technique. Bill and I were, because we were together, we knew exactly how we were going to do it. So I went down there to learn the technique with him, or teach him how we wanted to do it, kind of meld our 2 techniques together, because they weren't identical. But
that's important for the study. We need to have, we don't bias because somebody's doing it one way or a different way. Makes sense.
So we did that on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and Wednesday morning before Thanksgiving, he scoped my knee and did meniscectomy on my.
So FDA investigation
on my left knee,
a little bit of surgery done at the same time.
Yep. So I had a meniscal tear, and I was bow-legged like crazy to begin with. And if you chew up your medial meniscus,
sure.
We did the study. The FDA bought the data, said this is very good data. And
so who did the first arthroscopic bank cart with a suture anchor?
Gene Wolf or I, and I couldn't. I think it's Gene. I've got to give Gene credit.
Pretty close to each other, as it was happening.
He developed everything for doing it arthroscopically.
Sure.
It was his. Give Gene that he's one of the most creative arthroscopic surgeons there's ever been. I mean,
and that's like literally at the beginning, of arthroscopy. We've had Steve Snyder on, and he talks about how he's rigging up a cord to the ceiling on a bolt so he could do lateral traction on the shoulders so he could scope the shoulders. I mean, again, all these things. And it was funny because, you could scope a shoulder, you could do an arthroscopic acromioplasty, but we didn't have a lot of stuff. We would scope it, right?
Yeah.
And then we would open, okay? And then we'd do the operation. But it took people like yourself to innovate and come up with the tools that were required to be able to do this.
Right. And so it took a lot of smart people to come up with a lot of good ideas, and there are a few. As I said, Gene Wolf is one of the pioneers as far as developing techniques.
Sure.
And then industry. I mean, industry, particularly if they go to the operating room and identify the problem. You got a smart engineer or a creative person, and they watch you trying to do something and say, "Oh, I can make that easier, better. I can fill that need." If you can work with industry like that, it really does to develop good new things.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten to the point where the scales have tipped as far as, transparency, but I think that relationships between surgeons and industry is what propels innovation. You can't have an engineer designing a product without a surgeon. And, because it just won't work. They have to work together. It's like you need a John Glenn to fly the plane and you need somebody to build the plane. And so, it's nice that, at a course like this at OSET, I think, they do that really well where they integrate industry to be able to, and still get CME and have objectivity.
Oh, yeah. No, this is a very unique course. It really, I think it's a state of the art in all facets of orthopedics.
And it's intimate, right? I mean, it's like you're walking around. We got OGs everywhere, right? It's really remarkable. The goats that are walking around here in arthroplasty and spine and sports medicine. You just see these amazing people. They're like, "Hey, how are you?" They'll approach you. They say hi. So I really like. This is my favorite multi-specialty orthopedic meeting of the year. No offense to the Academy; they're doing a great job. It's important and all, but this is just a cool place, for sure.
Yeah.
So when I think of J.R. Richmond now, I almost think of like Bill Belichick. It's like a great leader.
Hopefully, I left when you
had all the Super Bowl
when I was
rings.
at the top.
No, but I mean, I just think of the lineage of all the people that you've taught and you've mentored over your career. What does that mean to you?
It means a lot. I mean, it is important to pass on. I mean, teaching is one of the most important things. My mother was a teacher. I grew up with her in the house all the time. Teaching. She was my 6th grade math teacher.
Yeah,
Sixth grade
amazing.
math teacher.
Yeah, your mother's your sixth grade math teacher. That's pretty cool.
She's the only teacher that ever threw me out of class.
Yeah, I'm shocked. I mean, I got thrown out of my house too, but my mother wasn't a teacher. But
And so she passed it on to me, that desire to be able to pass it on to somebody else. And then I have the luxury of having a son who's a teacher, who's a college professor.
yeah, that's it's really so important. I mean, you can only treat so many patients in your lifetime, right? But if you can help to teach people how to be a good surgeon, have good indications, and all of those things, you help so many other people, down the line as it goes, for sure. So that's a great privilege. I mean, Bill Levine, who I think is the greatest, mentor of his generation, only says the same thing regarding you and all the people that you've helped to train. So great stuff, JR. You're awesome, and you're still here. I love it. You come every meeting and you're raising your hand and you've got knowledge, and you were at my talk today, and I was just thinking about synthetics, right? Like Dacron and the things that we're using, and now we've figured out ways to use it with biology now. It's really neat.
Well, that's the real step, is to actually make biology work for us, because up until now, until very recently, everything we've done has been mechanical. It's a biomechanical something. It's a metal. It's a plastic. It's something else. And
Fix it with a hammer and nail.
Right. So I'll digress a little bit into one of the research things that we did that failed. I had another jumbo, a football player, Greg Altman, who blew out his ACL his senior year. Captain, and I can't remember if it was the preseason game that they have at Tufts for football, or was the first game, but anyway, he blew out his ACL and couldn't play his senior year. Fixed his ACL with bone, tendon, bone. He got to the end of his rehab with that and actually played his next year, because he enrolled in grad school and could do it. And he got to the end and said, "Boy, that was miserable. There's got to be a better way than having a bone, tendon, bone graft." And it was done arthroscopically assisted at that point, but still, you're taking a big hunk of your patellar tendon and sticking it in there. So he started a tissue engineering program. We got all the way using silk as a biomaterial, which is a pretty amazing biomaterial, and probably would have worked.
A natural biomaterial.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
right? You're not even making it. It comes from, from the silkworm.
Yeah, well, you can get it from silkworms, or you can get it from spiders.
Sure.
We use silkworm silk because it's much more reproducible than spider silk.
Sure.
And you can get silkworms to actually make it on call. The spiders, it's not.
I'm not going near the spiders,
no,
but that's okay.
Not me either. But we went through all the way through.
It's an arduous process,
and got it to the point of starting it in humans, and it turned out that what we decorated the silk with, the side chain that we put on it to make it generate collagen, so it was very effective at making growing collagen.
So you
in
can
the
make
joint.
collagen. Interesting.
Yeah, but when you put that into the bone, in goats it didn't come out that it really didn't work well. But as soon as we put it in humans, what happened is it didn't grow into the bone.
It kept growing.
It's just sat there as collagen, and the bone wouldn't grow into it because the side chains that were on the
so you wouldn't get fixation over
couldn't
time.
get fixation at the time.
Yeah, interesting.
It didn't work. At that point, a lot of the money was from federal grants that we had to do something with it, and so.
Well, at least it wasn't lost money. There were federal grants. It was,
it
was worthwhile cause to try.
Right,
for sure.
and actually, Greg had gone on and had some investors to help bring it along. He actually sold it to a plastic surgery company because it works great in soft tissue.
Well, there you go.
So
it still worked out well. But it didn't. But that's innovation, right? I mean, sometimes some things work and some things don't. I mean, one of my favorite JR stories. And I know you remember this. Whenever we were doing a BTP tendon back in the day in residency, you would be like, "Siggy, if you cut that fiber, every fiber you cut that's outside, you're taking another day of call. You remember that?
Oh yeah, don't cut a fiber. Cut parallel to them.
Exactly. You cut a fiber, you're taking another day of call. And that, I don't know, but back in those days, there was no 80-hour work week, right?
No.
We were working 120 hours a week, and when you were in residency, it was even crazier. They'd wake you up at 2 a.m. to make rounds with a flashlight, do, Zeke rounds
Yeah,
in
was
the PD floor.
Yeah, 2 to 4 was when he showed up. Usually closer to 4.
Yeah, but still, you know what I'm saying here. I'm like, the kids these days, they have no idea how good they are. I think they were trying to actually unionize. Wasn't there a rumor they're going to unionize in Boston?
Oh yeah,
and like so they could have all these extra stuff going on.
I don't know if they might actually have unionized.
Did they actually unionize? Well, maybe I'll go back to residency. I don't know.
Well, that in the EU they don't even have a 40-hour work week. They're 65 hours here.
Yeah.
In the EU which include at one point included the UK, they're down to a 38.5-hour work week.
Wow.
And the faculty, the senior faculty says they can't learn.
There's not enough time
As an orthopedic resident in 4 years, 5 years, it takes 8 to 10 years for them to learn everything.
That's what it's going to take. You need to have your reps. I mean, that's the only way you get it done. They don't get it, but I understand. I mean, it was pretty brutal times. I mean, we would walk across the street for Chinese food and live in the hospital for 3 days and go home and take a shower and crash. I mean, but that was the life, back then. It was a service, right? We were not only were we learning, but we were providing a service to the hospital, putting in Foleys, putting in IVs, drawing blood, right? All these crazy things, nowadays, at least they don't have to do any of that, but I don't know.
So the year of the famous Blizzard of '78, which you lived through.
Sure.
Where were you when it happened?
1978. I was in high school back in Baltimore at the time.
In Baltimore, so you probably got some decent snow out of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. But I mean, that was a really crazy blizzard.
It was. So I was at Penn. I was working at CHOP, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
Yep.
And I drove into work on the day it started to snow. It was as I was driving into work early in the morning. It started to snow. And I went home 7 days later.
Yeah,
I was there for 7 days. The city was just shut down.
They just didn't get it. I mean, it was like the way in which they could diagnose weather back then. It was just a very different era for sure.
It was a learning experience, though. I learned how to feed babies because the same nurses were stuck there the whole time.
Oh God!
So you had to go up and give the nurses in the NICU a break for taking care of.
That's why most of us either
kids.
Married or dated nurses. I mean, you didn't have much of a social life back then, for sure.
Yeah.
How about your experience as president of ANA? That must have been a really remarkable time for your time period. It's probably a 5-year commitment or so.
Yeah, it is. It's to actually get onto the presidential line. On average, you probably serve someplace between 6 and 8 years on the board, or as a secretary or treasurer, or one of those duties things. And then you sign on, and you're, the incoming president, the soon-to-be incoming president, then the president,
and then stick around for a year after,
2 years
afterwards.
So it's a lot of commitment of time, but it is an amazing organization that's totally committed to educating surgeons how to be better surgeons, and obviously with it's grew up on arthroscopic surgery, but it's really expanded to sports surgery, minimally invasive surgery. Anything that really fits within the realm of getting people back to what they want to do, whether it's sports or whatever, as quick as possible.
We're much better than we used to be, right? It used to be all experience-based medicine. My chief resident told me how to do this. That's why I do it. But now, that's still important, but we also have evidence-based medicine. We're doing a lot better than we used to in orthopedics, right? Really coming up with ideas and concepts that you can't just say it. You got to prove it, show us the details. And, of course, this is great because this is, that type of thing. But ANA does it amazingly well, and I'm a proud member of ANA as well.
Yeah, and the Learning Center, which was put together by ANA and the Academy a long time back in the 90s.
Yeah.
It was really the first dedicated cadaver education course where you could go as a surgeon and learn new surgical techniques under the tutelage of great practicing surgeons.
The Orthopedic Learning Center in Rosemont is absolutely one of the most important places, meccas for us to go to learn from the greats and be able to share your experiences both ways. Whenever you go, you always learn just as much as you bring, right? There's always new techniques. That's what I enjoy so much.
Oh yeah, no, getting to be faculty there in the lab, you get to watch fellow faculty that do things differently than you do and say, oh yeah, that's a better
good idea.
That's a better idea.
Yeah, exactly. Now look, JR, this is wonderful. I mean, I knew this would be a great episode. We can't thank you enough for your dedication to arthroscopy, orthopedics, sports medicine, your mentorship, your leadership. You've done so much to contribute to all that we do on a daily basis. It's a pleasure to call you friend, colleague, and mentor.
Well, thank you so much for that. And as I said, the most important part of what you do as a teacher and a mentor is educate people and bring them along. And it is such a treat to be here today, watching you up on the podium. Technical skills, superb.
Thank you, Professor.
Your teaching methods are great, and you haven't lost your sense of humor at all.
No, I think it was probably there back then, back in the 90s, but it stayed with me for sure. No, those are very kind words from my professor and mentor, Dr. J.R. Richmond. This is Dr. Scott Sigman, #FollowTheFro, host of The Ortho Show. Till next time.